On this week's Vaticano, Pope Francis celebrates the feasts of All Saints and All Souls in Rome. Bishops of the Chaldean Catholic Church gather in Rome to discuss the future of Christianity in the Middle East. George Weigel publishes one of his books in German for the first time with the endorsement of Cardinal George Pell, and the Polish and German bishops recall their reconciliation after World War II. All this plus a visit to the Sistine and Pauline Chapel in the Vatican 20 years after the restoration, and we take a glimpse into the International Festival of Sacred Music in Rome. For all this and more, stay tuned. You're watching Vaticano.
November started with the traditional great feast days of All Saints and All Souls. Pope Francis started the celebrations with the Angelus prayer in a sunny but chilly St. Peter's Square on Sunday, November the 1st. He recalled the family of saints that form the members of the Church.
Nella liturgia, il libro dell'Apocalisse.
In the liturgy, the Book of Revelation recalls an essential characteristic of saints, and that is, they're persons who belong wholly to God. They are represented as an immense multitude of chosen ones, dressed in white and marked with the seal of God. With this allegorical language, it is emphasized that the saints belong exclusively to God. They are His own. And what does it mean to carry the seal of God in one's own life, in one's own person? It means what the Apostle John explains. In Jesus Christ, we have truly become the sons of God.
On Sunday afternoon, Pope Francis traveled to Rome's largest cemetery to celebrate Mass and pray for the souls of the dead, preparing for the Feast of All Souls the following day. During his homily at Mass, Francis reflected on the Gospel reading of the Beatitudes, when Jesus outlines the path to blessedness in a series of paradoxes, beginning with the saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit."
Questa è la via della santità.
This is the way to sanctity, the same way that leads to joy. It is the way that Jesus took. He Himself is the way. He walks with us, and through Him we pass on to the next life, into the life of eternity. We ask the Lord to grant us the grace to be humble people, with the grace to know how to cry, the grace to be meek, the grace to work for justice and peace, and above all, the grace to let ourselves be forgiven by God and to become instruments of His mercy. The saints acted like that. They went before us into the eternal land of the fathers. They accompany us on our earthly pilgrimage and encourage us to always go ahead. Their intercession helps us to go on the way of Jesus and to obtain eternal happiness, also for our deceased brothers and sisters, for whom we offer this Mass.
Per i quali offriamo questa messa.
All Souls Day, celebrated the first day after the Feast of All Saints, commemorates the faithful departed, and Catholics practice the custom of praying for the souls in purgatory who await entry into heaven. On the actual day of All Souls, the Pontiff visited the grotto of St. Peter's Basilica. There he prayed for his deceased predecessors. Underneath the basilica, there are over 100 tombs, among them the tombs of 91 popes. Those entombed pontiffs who are canonized are moved into the upper basilica for public veneration. The last one moved upstairs was St. John Paul II. After the busy Synod of Bishops on the family, normalcy has returned to the Vatican, and the Pope is still busy. To start off, he received about 5,000 Sinti, Roma, and other itinerant people in audience. The meeting was marked by colorful music and dancing, as well as folk guitar music and singing by a Spanish gitana. In In his meditation, he told them to help overcome the modern attitude of individualism and obey laws by giving them a concrete example to follow.
Potete farlo se siete
You can do that if you try to be good Christians and to avoid what is not worthy of the name: falsity, cheating, fraud, swindling, quarrels. You have an example of Seferin Jimenez Malla, a son of your people who has distinguished himself with his virtue, his humility and his honesty, and by his dedication to the Virgin Mary, a devotion that brought him to martyrdom, and to be known as the Martyr of the Rosary. I suggest him to you today as an example of religious life, as well as a cultural and ethical attitude that is given to you.
He also mentioned drug trafficking, human trafficking, and the abuse of gypsy children, many of whom beg on the streets of Europe's big cities. Francis said that while the state had to guarantee their education, it was the duty of adults to see to it that the children go to school. Pope Francis received a pilgrim group of El Salvadorans in audience who had come to Rome to thank him for the beatification of Archbishop Oscar Romero. The Pope departed from his prepared address to the group to deliver unusually pointed remarks about the past detractors of Romero, who was beatified last May in El Salvador. Romero, who was shot while saying Mass in a hospital chapel, was beatified as a martyr for the faith. Oscar Romero is well known throughout Latin America for his defense of the poor. Pope Francis has sent a telegram of condolences to the Russian president and to the people following the crash of Russian Airbus A321 in Egypt, in which 224 people were killed. Pope Francis has received an unusual gift that is supposed to strengthen the Catholic-Anglican relations, a cricket bat signed by the Archbishop of Canterbury and his team. Australian Cardinal George Pell gave Francis the bat on Thursday after the St. Peter's Cricket Club beat the Church of England side by 43 runs in a 20-over match this weekend. Pope Francis promptly signed it himself. Pope Francis received the President of the Republic of Lithuania in private audience in the Vatican on Thursday. During the cardinal discussions, the Lithuanian president expressed appreciation to the Catholic Church for the positive contribution it has made to Lithuanian society. Pope Francis received 2 paintings and honey as a gift. In exchange, he gifted a bronze medal signifying peace. Pope Francis received the Associates of Radio Maria in audience on Thursday, October the 29th. The Pope greeted all those gathered in the Sala Clementina in the Vatican.
Saluto con affetto tutti voi.
I salute you with affection, you who form the worldwide family of Radio Maria. I thank the President, Emanuele Ferrario, for his kind words, and I thank you all who work in the different publications, active in 70 countries on 5 continents. Through you, you are present in the hearts of your listeners in a growing way, who appreciate the radio programs of Radio Maria and sustain you with a voluntary work as their contributions.
La sostengono con il volontariato e le offerte.
21 Chaldean Catholic bishops from Syria, Iraq, and other Middle Eastern nations participated in the annual synod, which was moved to Rome for security reasons. In an audience with Pope Francis, they were greeted with a message of comfort and Christian solidarity in light of the challenges they're facing today.
With the approach of the Jubilee year, may God's mercy soothe the wounds of war afflicting the heart of your communities, that no one may feel discouragement in this time when the outcry of violence seems to drown out our heartfelt prayers for peace.
The Synod Fathers acknowledged in their meetings that the Chaldean Church is facing many difficulties. Points of discussion were communion and unity among dioceses, as well as the tens of thousands of Christians fleeing their countries due to the persecution by ISIS. The Chaldean Catholic Church is the largest of the Eastern Catholic churches in Iraq, presently numbering around 500,000 people, but they're concerned about their future there.
To be honest, I cannot tell anyone to stay. There are hundreds of reasons which encourage people to leave. There is no one reason, to really urge them and help them to stay. But we hope and we have faith that this community would stay, and please God would be strengthened by the prayers that's been receiving.
His plan is to help those families staying behind to live with dignity, since for many Christians their faith is their only consolation as they face persecution.
During this week's general audience, the Pope focused on the family as a place to grow in sanctity.
Hoy quisiera centrarme en la familia como ámbito.
Today I would like to center on the family as a place to learn how to live the mutual gift of forgiveness, without which no love can last. We always pray for it in the Our Father. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. You cannot live without forgiveness, or at least you cannot live well, especially within the family. Each day we do harm in one way or another. But what is asked of us is to immediately heal the wounds we have caused and to restore the bonds that have been damaged. If we wait too long, it's harder. And there is a simple remedy. Don't let the day end without apologizing, without making peace. Parents with their children, and also amongst siblings. It doesn't take a big speech. Just a little pat and that's enough. This makes marriage and the family stronger, resistant to our small and great wrongdoings.
Pequeñas y grandes fechorías.
The Church is just coming off a synod on the family. One of the aims of a gathering of this kind is to stimulate renewal within the Church in order to bring about a renewal of the world. Professor George Weigel had renewal in mind when he wrote the book Evangelical Catholicism. On the tail end of the October Synod, he was in Rome presenting the volume's new German translation.
This book is an attempt to explain what the last three popes have meant by the new evangelization, where that came from, what needs to change in the Church in order to make the new evangelization more effective, and then how reform in the Church always means reaching back into the tradition of the Church to recover something that has been lost or that has gotten a bit moldy, and bringing it into the present moment for the sake of the preaching of the gospel.
Reform, he said, does not necessarily mean introducing something new, nor does it imply a cafeteria Catholicism.
No, reform means to recover something old that's been lost and then to bring it into the present in a new way. The renewal of the liturgy is a pretty good example of this. The rediscovery of the Church's commitment to a distancing of itself from state power. Declaration on Religious Freedom at Vatican II is another example of this. But do-it-yourself religion, or as a professor at Yale University says, ice your own cupcake religion, really has no future. It's not too interesting. It's not what has endured and thrived for 2,000 years.
The head of the Vatican's finance office, Cardinal George Pell, was also there supporting renewal in the Church through the family.
Well, two very important criteria for reform. The first is, is a Christian community handing on the faith to their children? And secondly, how many young people within the Christian church or community are coming forward for positions of religious leadership? Priesthood, religious life, the movements, volunteers. Now, you can judge from that whether there needs to be more reform, and I think you can judge from history, our recent history, the post-conciliar history, that the situation is just as George Weigel describes it, and that is a joyful, happy, vigorous and confident affirmation of Christian teaching and putting it into practice in good families and good communities.
Cardinal Pell also attempted to right some of the wrong expectations of reform some drew from the family synod.
I think it's a very positive, it's been a very positive synod. I think most of the bishops were happy. You know, often the expectations that are built up in the secular press are quite unrealistic and very much shaped by their ambitions for the Church to abandon its unseemly teachings, which it's taken from Christ and which it's practiced for 2,000 years, on sexuality, marriage and the family. And the Church isn't going to do that.
Weigel's book is now available in English and German. In 1965, a letter was sent by bishops of Poland to those in Germany inviting reconciliation for any wrong done during the Second World War. It was a concrete step to forgiveness between the two countries after the crimes committed against Poland during that war. We forgive and ask for forgiveness, the Polish bishops say in the letter. To commemorate the 50th anniversary of this event, the Polish and German bishops met in the Vatican last week. Numerous Polish bishops were on hand, while the bishops of Germany were unrepresented. Germany's ambassador to the Holy See participated in the event.
First of all, we want to say thank you for this message 50 years ago, for the courage the bishops had, because it was not so easy in the political situation they had in Poland, in Germany, in Europe. Second, we want to remember this message and the power of reconciliation for the history in Europe. And then, actually, in these days, we feel that we should not only remember, but come to process today to think about what is our responsibility now.
The president of the Polish Bishops' Conference explained how reconciliation between nations begins on a grassroots level between two people.
I suppose that we have to go to this way of reconciliation, which is not something which ends once, but it is always needed in our history, in our present time. Maybe it is possible some kind of reconciliation between nations, but normally it is the way which requires a person-to-person way, a pretty personal way of going to person. So it's not the process which is between both sides, but between millions of people. Prejudices and some kinds of stereotypes which ended between nations should be eliminated through this way of personal reconciliation. And this is what is needed in our time.
It should also not be forgotten that among the prominent supporters of this letter was then Krakow Archbishop Karol Wojtyła, who later became Saint Pope John Paul II.
In September this year, an overwhelming majority of the United Nations member states voted in favor of the resolution on raising the flags of non-member observer states at the United Nations. On Tuesday, October the 13th, during an official ceremony, the Holy See flag was raised at the United Nations in Geneva.
The Holy See has long been an active observer at the United Nations. It plays a particularly important role in the promotion of intercultural and interreligious dialogue. There are too many instances where religion is used to divide people. Being attentive to such instances enables us to speak out against them, and the Holy See has done so repeatedly. Hence, the presence of the Holy See, especially at the Human Rights Council here in Geneva, is of the utmost importance to all of us.
With the many crises facing the international community today, the role of the United Nations becomes ever more crucial. We all feel a responsibility to contribute to the important service the UN renders to the human family in the search for peace and the pursuit of development as a benefit to all people in respect of their conscience and identity.
The flag of the Holy See is one of only 2 square country flags in the world, the other being the flag of Switzerland. The flag consists of 2 vertical bands with the crossed keys of St. Peter and the papal tiara, centered in the white band. The gold or yellow represents spiritual power, while the silver key to heaven represents worldly power. But the raising of the Holy See flag at the UN was more than just a symbolic gesture.
It shows that there is a determination on the part of the Holy See to continue to participate in the events, in the activities, in the debates that take place in this unique forum, this unique arena that is the United Nations. If we look ahead, we see that with all the crises and the conflicts that we witness in the world today, there is an even greater need to have a United Nations that functions well with the participation of all the men and women of goodwill of this world.
The participation of the Holy See at the United Nations started in 1951. Today, 64 years later, the Holy See continues to maintain their observer status. But with the raising of their flag, the question is, are there any intentions to become a full member of the UN?
I would say that yes, it's possible for the Holy See to become a member, but it will continue for a while the way it is, because it serves the Holy See well, the position of observer. It can intervene in all the activities of the UN bodies, and at the same time stay without the necessity of having to vote on every...
On Thursday, October 29th, the director of the Vatican Museums invited journalists to visit the Sistine Chapel on occasion of a book presentation. The research underscores the importance of the restoration of the Sistina 20 years later. It was built between 1473 and 1481 for Pope Sixtus IV, for whom it was named. The restoration of the ceiling began on November 7th, 1984, and took roughly 8 years. Especially the frescoes by Michelangelo were cleaned and cracks were fixed, which led to some controversy regarding the reworking of the techniques used in the Renaissance. In 2004, the Vatican announced that the Pauline Chapel was to be restored as well, works that were finished in 2009. That chapel was commissioned in 1538 by the order of Pope Paul III and completed in 1540. The Cappella Paulina served as both the Chapel of the Sacrament and the Chapel of the Conclave before the Sistine was used for that purpose. Paul III dedicated the chapel to the feast of the conversion of St. Paul, a festival to which he displayed particular devotion. In 2010, the Vatican website released a virtual reality rendered version of the Cappella Paulina. It presents the chapel in part 3D rendering and part high-resolution photography, unquestionably made after the 2009 restoration. The International Film Festival of Sacred Music kicked off with a beautiful performance in St. Peter's Basilica. This 14th edition of the festival featured the Solemn Mass of Saint Cecile by French composer Charles Gounod as first of 9 concerts over the span of 10 days in Rome. The purpose of the event is to increase the public's awareness of the institutional activities of the Fondazione Pro Musica e Arte Sacra, which raises funds for the restoration of religious artifacts and buildings. The International Festival is central to its benevolent activities. The concerts are free of charge. This year's festival features Beethoven, Verdi, Bach, Mahler, and many more. as well as the famous Illuminart Philharmonic Choir and Orchestra, who flew to Rome with their conductor Tomomi Nishimoto directly from Japan. A German choir is also featured this year.